We're going to take a quick look at how to use Ableton's push presets within CV Tools. In this first video, we're just going to focus on the clock and transport control. And to get there, we go into Packs, CV Tools, Push 3 presets, open that up and look at the first two here. They're identical devices in terms of functionality. It's just that their default routing is different. Let me show you what I mean. If I pull Push 3 Clock Transport CV1 onto a new track, you'll see it loads up. By default, clock is set to external out 5 and transport is set to external out 6. And what that means is that device is pre-configured to run CV signals out of the first of the CV/pedal ports that Ableton has, which I'm pointing to here, the one next to the headphone, right next to the headphone output. Similarly, if I take out, you've probably guessed by now, Push 3 Clock Transport CV2, put that on a new track, you'll see it comes pre-configured to run clock out of external out 7 and transport out of external out 8, which means it's sending CV signals out of the second CV pedal port. And that's handy because basically once you load those devices up, you don't need to worry about your own routing or configuration. And you can select them from the Ableton menu when you're in controller mode, as I am at the moment. But equally, when you're in standalone mode, you can go into Packs and load them as you normally would using the browser, and they'll work exactly the same way. And again, they come pre-configured. The only thing you have to do in the main settings is check that in settings, pedals and CV, you have both those ports already set to CV out, otherwise this won't function. By default, they're typically on trigger and sustain, i.e. for running pedals, for controlling your push. But when you switch them to here, to CV out, both of them, that means they're both now ready to send CV signals. So if we go back to our devices, now we're going to look specifically at how I've got these devices working with two of the sequencing modules in my Eurorack setup. First one being Pamela's Pro Workout, and the second one being the 606 sequencer from Tubbutec, which runs this drum module. So dealing with Pam's Pro Workout first, I have the Push 3 Clock Transport CV1 as it comes pre-configured to go out of CV outs 5 and 6. So I've connected from that first port the stereotype jack going into a splitter so that I can then connect each of those CV signals, 5 and 6, to separate points on the system. In this case, the external out 5, which is what clock is set to in the device, is going to the clock input on Pam's Pro Workout. External out 6 for transport in the device is going to this port labeled run. In very similar fashion, 7 and 8, the CV2 device that we loaded, is going again via an adapter and split cables like that. Clock on 7 is going to clock on the Tubbutec 6equencer. Transport is going to the port here. It's labeled reset, and it's a Tubbutec version of that run port. It's the one that accepts transport controls. So they're both hooked up by hardware. We've got our devices loaded. There's a couple more things we need to check though for each one, because these devices respond differently to Eurorack signals in terms of clocking and resolution. If you have different devices to these, you're going to need to check your manual or do a bit of trial and error. With Pam's Pro Workout, it works with a PPQN clock type, so you can change that from your push here, obviously with your mouse in the Ableton screen device settings there. 24 set at 24 PPQN, that's just the resolution. And importantly, need to switch from trigger to gate. Moving on to the second track where I have the CV2 device loaded. On this one, which is, remember, controlling clock signals to sequencer here out of the second port. Slightly different because of the way the Tubbutec sequencer reads signals. I've got this set to normal 1/16th division, and this one is trigger, not gate. So depending, as I said, depending on which devices you're trying to control, you may need to find the best settings for your devices, but this is what works here. What that means, having set it up, is when I press play on the push, we should see and hear those modules swing into action. And what we'll also see is if we change the tempo on push, that will affect the tempo of both those devices. So that's it. We've got start, stop and tempo control of two separate sequencers within our Eurorack, all running out of those two ports. We also have the audio coming back in from both on different tracks. I'm using my ADAT expanders from Expert Sleepers to manage audio, which I will cover in a separate video on ADAT CVN audio signals going to and from push. But for now, let me know if that's helpful in terms of clocking Eurorack using these very handy push 3 devices, and any tips or questions you want to share, please drop them in the comments. Thanks for watching.